Good to go. Awesome. All right, folks. Welcome. I'm coming to you all the way from across the world in Davis, California. So everyone, Scott Sambucci here. Want to say a quick hello, obviously, just to get started. And then also want to introduce Suzette, who you might see on the screen as well. Suzette, give a little wave if you would.
Maybe if
Suzette,
I talk, I'll pop
yeah,
on the screen.
can talk.
Not sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi.
So Suzette and I work together here at Sales Qualia. She does everything on the backstage side of things. I'm just the puppeteer, the marionette on the front stage that does the singing and the dancing. So together, along with Monique and the rest of the crew over at the Growth Factory, we're bringing to you the sales workshop. And I'm really excited to be part of this. I've been working with Rick Spencer now. I've known him for about a year or more now. And we've been looking for ways to get involved with the local startup community. And this is what we landed on as the first opportunity to do this more formally with the Growth Factory. So one of the things as the reason I'm coming to you, as you may have heard or obviously have seen, it's funny because I've actually done workshops for startup groups like literally all over the world, both Zoom and in person. I've been everywhere from the Middle East to the Nordic countries all the way down to New Zealand and done workshops in person with people. But here I gotta come to you live on Zoom from Davis, California, which is a little ridiculous. Unfortunately, I tested positive for COVID. Good news is I'm totally healthy. Family's totally healthy. We get a very, very mild case of it. So rather than me show up and make some folks feel uncomfortable, wanted to play it safe. I know some people have family members or yourselves might have some different health conditions that would make you more compromised towards something like COVID. And I want to be respectful of that. And so I appreciate your willingness to come on site and sit as a group, because I love presenting in groups, not just because it's me with a group, it's because the group gets to work and feed off of the energy of each other, and certainly expect that from the time today. So whenever I'm presenting and whenever I'm teaching, I always feel there's kind of two ways to teach and two ways to learn. There's the old way and there's the new way. So the old way is, guy stands in front of a room, or in this case, guy stands in front of a Zoom and does some talking, and people in the audience take some notes, and hopefully somewhere along the way, telepathy happens, meaning that I've got ideas and frameworks and thoughts that I've got in my brain. They're going to get through my brain, out of my mouth, to your ears, through your brain, and somewhere along the way, we're hoping that what I have in my brain ends up in your brain exactly as I see it. Turns out that's actually really hard to do. And so instead of this just being guys standing in front of the room talking, or in front of the Zoom talking, I really, really, really encourage us to turn this into a conversation. It's going to be better for you as a learner. It's going to be more kinesthetic for you. It's going to allow you to use different learning devices in your mind. And it's also going to make it a lot more fun and a lot more exciting for all of us. So first thing I want to do, if we would, is I want to do a little exercise. So if you would, everybody, please stand up from your seated position. Stand up from your seated position. This is required. So it's hard for me to get a full and complete layout, but it looks like most people are kind of sitting or standing next to each other. So what I want you to do is just partner up with somebody. You can look them, get face to face with them, stand one in front of the other, just as long as you have a partner. So go ahead and get a partner real quick. We got a partner? Okay, good. Now, what I want each partner to do, take your right hand and just hold it up like this, and then put it on the shoulder, the opposite shoulder of the person in front of you. Yep, just like that. Now, give them a little shake, not too hard, just a little shake, and then say, "Oh shit, this is interactive." All right, good. So now you get the gist of it. You guys can sit down.
We're just doing something. Okay, cool.
Get it right.
Oh, here. So certainly that's a way for us to kind of prove the point that I want this to be a conversation. I want this to be interactive. The more the questions that you ask, the more specific we can get with applying what we're going to be teaching and learning to your business. And chances are the questions you have, even if they're not known from other people ahead of time, when they hear your questions or your topics, chances are they're going to go, yeah, actually, that's a great question. I have that question too for my business, right? So by way of introduction, I think some of you, I've already connected with several of you on LinkedIn. Some of you I've already known from years past and programs past. I've seen recognize some folks that I've talked with in the past and worked with in the past. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Scott Sambucci. I am the founder and self-proclaimed chief sales geek at Sales Qualia. My background, very quickly, I spent about 25 years doing enterprise B2B sales, both with a couple of large publicly traded companies, as well as 3 different Silicon Valley startups. So the first 2 startups, one was called Applia, which is in the education tech space. That's what brought me to Silicon Valley out in 2002, back in 2002. We were acquired by Thomson Learning about 3 years into the company, so we had a nice exit there. Second company is called Altos Research, which is in the housing data business. I left that company many years ago. Mike Simonson, who was the founder, continued running the operation, and then recently that company got acquired as well, a lot on the backs of the sales process that we built together way back in the 2000s. And most recently, I worked with a company called Blend, which is a company that did an IPO in the New York Stock Exchange back in July of 2021. So I say all that and I share all that not to impress you, but to impress upon you that I've been in your shoes. I've been that early stage, either founder or early stage sales leader, and trying to get that literal 0 to 1, from 0 revenue to $1 million in revenue, or getting from 0 customers to 1 customers, and getting from 1 to 3 and 3 to 10. I've lived this multiple times at multiple startups. I know what it's like. Not everyone can be as successful as, landing an IPO, but even at the place where you land an IPO, it's an interesting sort of perspective, because a lot of folks go, man, it'd be great if we could land an IPO, and that would be constitute success for us and all those things. And while that might be true in some respects, I saw this on LinkedIn not long ago, so I grabbed it. And it was Goldman Sachs is interviewing the CEO of a company called CrowdStrike. And it's part of that talk when they were discussing the IPO and how Goldman helped them with the IPO after years and years and years of building the company, building revenue, building customers, building systems, building product. Even at that point of an IPO, the co-founder CEO, George Kurtz, said, well, for us, the IPO is just the green flag, not the checkered flag. So I share that with you just because, it's a long, long journey that you're on. And there's lots of different ways to get to an end point with your business. It doesn't have to be IPO, but every day that you're out there doing this, it can feel like a starting line. Every day that alarm goes off, you're walking into the office or hopping on Zooms, and it's like, okay, today is day 1 all over again. So I'm just curious, by a show of hands, how many of you kind of feel that way when you're running the startup? Like every day kind of feels a little bit like day 1. Yeah. Now, what's also important, of course, is we need to look back over time and feel that success and see that success, go back 3 months or 6 months or 12 months and look at where we were compared to where we are, because chances are you've made a ton of progress. But it is important just to remember, like, this is a long game. It's hard to do. And it's not for the faint of heart, which is why you're here working with the Growth Factory. So let's go ahead and dig into the presentation. So we had sent out an email a little bit earlier today, and I'm not sure how many of you had received it. There's a workbook that we had sent out. Does everybody have a copy of that printed, or how many of you have a copy of that printed? Some of you. Yes, no. Yep. Okay, cool. If for whatever reason you don't, that's totally fine. Just grab your notebook, grab a piece of paper. The reason we do these workbooks is that I like to teach using frameworks and models, lots of pictures, lots of drawings, lots of sketching. It's more kinesthetic, and it helps you see bigger picture things that are interrelated as opposed to just a linear type. So if you're using a laptop to take notes, it's probably actually going to be worse for you to try to type out notes in a laptop. Instead, I want you to close that laptop, grab a piece of paper and a pencil, write it down, and then later on you can translate those notes into some kind of written form for your team. Okay. So let's get the conversation started, and then we'll go into the agenda and the flow for the rest of the day. I want to hear from at least a couple of you. Look at the question that I've got here posted on my screen, which is, what's been most challenging for you and your company about sales and growth this year? So 2023, like a lot of years recently, has been an interesting year, to say the least, for different ways, from different perspectives. And so I want to hear from a couple of you. Just kind of shout it out. What are some things that have been most challenging, or if there's one thing in particular, what's most challenging about sales and growth for your company this year? Shout them out, and I'll just jot a few things down.
Awareness.
Awareness. Okay. Does that mean awareness of your product or solution?
Yes,
Yep.
awareness of the company, the solution, yeah.
Yep. Great. What else?
For me, it's finding the right people to work with in the organization and then very long cycles. So how to reduce the time.
Yep.
Yeah, just to add on to what Renetta said, just the time, everyone, no one's on your schedule. They're on their own schedule, so that could be challenging.
And
Right.
Developing a repeatable process.
Yep. Finding repeatability. Yeah, for sure. Good. What are a few more?
I think honing in on ICP.
Mm-hmm. ICP identification. Absolutely. Anything else?
Just having sufficient pipeline.
Pipeline. Yep. Sometimes no shortage of interesting conversations, but how many of those lead to actual real sales opportunity that we can convert in the near term? Cool. Anything else?
We're running trials, so just like running a really tight trial process.
Mm-hmm.
Trial or pilot, you mean?
Trial, yeah, pilots.
Yep.
Yeah. Plus one on that, yes.
Yeah.
For sure. Sometimes there's this notion of what we call never-ending pilot. Never-ending pilot, where it just kind of keeps on going. For sure. It's a good list, right? And
Just one more, finding talent.
finding talent.
Sales
Yes.
talent.
Yeah, it's it's a weird
Sales
economy out
talent
there.
Specifically, right?
Say that again.
Sales talent specifically.
Sales talent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of an odd situation because there's been so many companies that have made cuts to their workforce, especially on the sales side of things, where they're cutting back on their sales organization as well as other parts of the organization. So there's this nice big pool of talent out there, allegedly. On the other hand, unemployment rate continues to be relatively low
Yeah.
in an environment
Yeah.
that people would have expected that to go up with interest rates and other macro things. So it's like, wow, there should be a lot of talent for me to choose from. I should be able to pick great from multiple people. But I can't even find one that can step in and do that work. And sometimes that's a function of the talent pool. And other times it might be a function of the fact that maybe we're not quite ready to find that sales talent, meaning that we don't yet have a defined process. We don't have a defined set of tasks. We don't know exactly what we're looking for yet. And so it's hard to find the thing that you're looking for if you don't quite know what that thing is, right? So it could be some mix of both too. Great. Now, when you think about your company and we think about the next 12 months, or you could go out, 16 months, say by the end of 2024, whatever timeline works for you. I know when I speak with founders, a lot of times they have a certain metric or a certain outcome. Some people call it a critical number. Some people call it a true north metric. Maybe it's just a pure revenue number, customer number. When you think about your business, what's the number one result that you want for your company in the next 12 months? What are some ways that you're going to measure success? Imagine we're having this conversation about a year from now, and we're looking back and going, hey, remember last year when Scott was on Zoom and we did that workshop and we said, man, if a year from now we could be at this place or get this result, that would be successful. Wow, we hit it. We're really happy. So
ARR,
what are some things you're looking at?
yeah, ARR,
And what's a specific, is like a specific number?
yeah, specific.
What's your number?
Well, so this is 12 months, this is, 6 months, but to get a 2 million ARR.
Yeah, 2 million ARR. Great. Nice specific number. What are some other results or other numbers that you all are looking at?
I'll give you another one, 50 logos.
So 50 logos and $2 million in ARR.
Right, correct.
Which is more important?
ARR.
And how about for the rest of you? What are some other results? It doesn't have to be a specific revenue number. We have a client that we're working with right now that works in the e-commerce space. And while they pay attention to revenue and pay attention to customers, their actual metric is what they call gross merchandise value, meaning of the retailers they help, they're actually tracking how much gross merchandise goes through their system. Because they know if that number goes up, if they hit 100 million in a year, that's good. 300 million in a couple of years, that's even better. $1 billion in 5 years is like that big goal. And that would tell them, even though it's the customer's number, because it's their gross merchandise value, for them, it means that everything else they're doing is working. So what are some, that's just an example of a metric that may not be revenue or customers, but it could be that true north.
Yeah, for us, it's recurring customers. So a monthly recurring, we have some that are coming and going, but our heart is the whale. It's users.
Ah,
And the channels are B2B, corporate B2B, that's why I'm here today, and also health and medical. So our key metric is to get to 2,000 recurring customers, users, sorry, that are paying every week, $150. So that gets us to a certain, that's one in GMV, of course. GMV is another one.
great. What are a couple more?
I track the number of transactions. So I look at the number of users, but I look at it from every day I look at the number of transactions through the platform. So that's a key metric for me.
And what's your 12 months from now? What's that number for you that you want to be at?
If I'm at about, let's say 300,000 transactions in the next 12 months, that's a good number for me.
Cool. 300,000. Cool. Good. So these are just examples. And I think it's important for you. The reason I like to ask this question, both the challenges and the results, is because it helps for you as we're doing the rest of our time together to think about, okay, where are we now? What are some of the challenges or obstacles or ways that we feel like we might be getting slowed down? And where are we now relative to where we want to be? Because as we're sharing content, sharing frameworks, talking about these things and applying them, then I want you to sort of think about how you could apply these in your business to overcome those challenges and get you to that result. Okay. Now, one of the things can be really difficult whenever I'm teaching, especially a group like yours. Like, I know some of you are very experienced in business. Some of you have done multiple startups. It's not like you're a bunch of, 21-year-olds out of college that are doing some hotshot startup. Like, a lot of you are doing this and have done this for a while. So you've got a lot of experience. And to that end, I know myself, as I'm hitting my 50s next year, I kind of get a little bit complacent, or I get a little bit sort of like rooted in the way I've always done things. Ask my son, right? And he's like, why do you always have to do it this way? Like, this is the way I've always done it, right? And so I state that because it's important for us to move out of our comfort zone. And I just want to share a little bit of a story for you to help emphasize this. So this is my son and I a couple of years ago. This is at Lake Berryessa, the hills over Lake Berryessa. I'm sure a lot of you know where those are. There's some nice hiking trails out there. My wife took this picture, and one of the things I've done over the years is a lot of ultra running and endurance, long distance endurance races. So I've done several Ironmans and several ultra marathons. So a couple 100 and a couple of 200-mile races I've done. And one of the races I've done is the Tahoe 200. It's a 200-mile foot race around Lake Tahoe. And it starts, the years that I did it, I've done this twice, starts right around here at Homewood Ski Resort. And it works its way south through the Rubicon Trail, down around where Sierra Tahoe is, up towards Heavenly, and then up towards Incline Village, and then back to the beginning. So overall, it's a 205-mile trek, if you will. It's a journey. And, obviously, maybe you're already starting to think about the parallels and where I'm going with this, because, running an ultra marathon is, at least we know there's an end line, but it's a long race, and running a startup is a lot the same way. And you'll notice that all of these places are what we call checkpoints or aid stations. And they're places where, as a runner, you can stop and refill, get some food, get some more water in your bottles, maybe even take a nap, those sorts of things. And so I remember this race. This is a picture my wife took of me when I got to Heavenly, which is about halfway through the race. And this is about 36 hours after I started the race. I remember getting to Heavenly and feeling like, yes, I did 100 miles. Oh shit, I got 100 to go. Like, are you serious? What did I sign up for? And the good news is that these races allow you to bring a pacer with you. I don't know, some of you might have friends, or some of you might do some running, friends that have done races like the Western States 100 or other local races in the Tahoe area. You can have a pacer run with you at a certain point in the race to kind of help you through. Part of it's for safety, part of it's just for motivation to kind of keep you going. So I got to the station, you can see that it's daylight still. And this aid station, I was supposed to kind of get in and out pretty quickly. My plan was to get in, get some food, and get out in like 10 or 20 minutes. And I had a friend of mine named Joe who was going to be pacing me for the next 20 miles. But I got here and I just felt pretty bad. I was just like not motivated to keep going. So after about an hour and a half of trying to take a nap and get it going, finally he's like, now you can see it's dark out and it's getting cold. And he said, look, man, like it's time to go. He kind of gave me a little kick in the butt. He said, it's time to go. Just doesn't matter how fast we go. Doesn't matter how long it takes us to get to the next aid station. Just follow me. I'll never forget those words. Just follow me. And so for the next 20 miles, I basically just hiked behind this guy. And he got me through the ups and got me through the downs and some of the peaks. It was really cold and windy because it was getting to be nighttime. And he was right. You know, it got me through the next aid station to the next aid station. And then I started to feel better. And then the rest of the race went pretty well until I got to mile 175. And this is in Tahoe City, where there's another aid station. And the aid station is actually in the town of Tahoe City. How many of you have been to Tahoe City? Probably been there at least once or twice. So I got to Tahoe City around just before midnight, and I had been running that stretch. I'd been running for about 21 hours straight. So I took a little nap and then ran for 21 hours straight to get, you know, about 70 miles down the course. And it was so bad that I was actually hallucinating because I hadn't really slept very much. And I got into Tahoe City and I couldn't find the aid station. And I actually got to the point where I was like running around Tahoe City looking for this aid station at just around midnight. And I was thinking to myself, the race is playing a practical joke on me. They've actually packed up and moved the aid station. There's no aid station here, and they've closed the race, and it's all a joke on Scott. Like that's where my frame of mind was. I was just like completely out of it. Well, finally, I called my wife, and she was at the aid station with me with my son, and she directed me on how to get there. And I got there, and I remember there was a fire. You can see I was all bundled up. It's really cold, and there's my son there. And I'm thinking to myself, like, God, what am I doing? You know, like I haven't slept. I'm hallucinating. What do I do? Again, fortunately, I had another person who was going to be pacing me. This is Nathan. So Nathan is an expert hiker. He's hiked the Appalachian Trail. He's hiked the entire Pacific Crest Trail, and he's hiked the Te Aroha Trail in New Zealand from tip to tip. And he's not a runner, but he's a hiker. And same thing. He's like, I know this trail. I'm going to get you to the next 20 miles. It's going to be fine. And he picked me up and he got me going. And finally, we did get to the finish line the following morning. So after 73 hours, I finished this race. And I share this story with you because you can see a lot of those parallels between, you know, something as fun as ultra running, type 2 fun, as they call it, and running your startup, right? There's lots of ups and downs. There's lots of places where you need that help and support. You need somebody to be a Sherpa. You need somebody to be a guide. You need somebody to give you a little kick in the butt here and there. You need somebody to tell you it's going to be okay. And if you just get that checkpoint to checkpoint or station to station, at some point you will reach a finish line. You will reach a point where you know that you've made good progress. For me, you know, you cross the line, you get a belt, you get pictures taken, then you go home and have some pizza, and that's it. You know, for some of you, it might be a much bigger reward, and I hope that it is. And so I share that because, you know, you've got to get out of that comfort zone. You know, I got to Heavenly at 100 miles, and I was like, you know what? It's actually pretty good here. I could just quit. I could go home and it could be done. I got to mile 175. I could have quit, could have stopped, could have gone home, but I didn't because I had those people around me moving me forward. So when you get out of your comfort zone, that's where the magic happens. So I'd be curious to hear from a couple of you, like, what about this story kind of resonates for you when you think about running your startup and growing your company? What hits home for you?
All of it.
Anything in particular? Maybe you could share a personal experience or something when it comes to your company where you felt like it was time to maybe call it quits, but you had somebody that could help you boost forward.
Yeah, well, I don't call quits. I did do half Ironman, so I did stretch myself physically. And then
Awesome.
yeah, doing a startup is like you said, you know, like 200-mile run. And for me, it's more of like when I hit a wall and I'm not sure, you know, getting the people to help me get me out of the, you know, where I'm stuck. I don't see a way to stop. Like I'm going to stop and I'm going to die or get the company to IPO. So there's no other option.
Right. There is no other
it
option.
would be much easier and much better experience than, you know, with the help and the advisors along the way and supportive community. So
Good. How about for the rest of you? Anybody else? Like, what, maybe you have something similar or something different that's related to startups feeling like that ultra marathon?
I got one. You can't see me though. I'm just around the corner. I am here though. It's just like, for us, I think. What has been the case is we'll have these amazing days, amazing weeks. And it'll feel like, using your example, we could run 1,000 miles and then something will happen and it just like. Kind of sends you into a bit of a tailspin. You're like, oh, what am I doing here? And, should I be even doing this? And then, you speak to somebody else, just like you said, and we had a recent experience where just kind of feeling that way. And then speaking to this individual, just like if we went through every piece of the business and just realized, oh, you know what, we're actually doing really well.
Exactly.
And that was enough, like when we saw where we were, where we are and where we're going and what was projected. And all of those things, and like it really, it was really invigorating, and actually, quite frankly, invigorated the team as well. And was able to lead to some really good partnerships even recently. So it's just it's interesting kind of how it goes, but it's like I don't know, I was reading a quote by just Sam Altman just recently, just like it's just about that endurance, enduring, and sticking with it, and waking up every morning and doing the basics, as they say in sports, just doing the fundamentals.
Yeah, you sometimes you don't realize how you've been just putting down those baseline or that foundation every day. There's all the analogies, put down a brick by brick, or lay the tracks down as you're going down the trail. And it's helpful to just look back and go, wow, like I said at the very beginning, what if we look back 3 months or 6 months or 12 months from now? And I've done this in workshops where I've had like a full day where we've actually done that look back. And you'd be really surprised if you did this and even included your team or your partners or your business partners or your partners at home or your family, and just ask them like, hey, remember last year when we're really struggling with this part of the business, and look where we are now. Think about where we were, and we were kind of a little tight with money and it was really tough. We had to make some hard decisions, and that hard decision, look, like it's actually paid off a little bit, because now we were able to start turning a profit a little bit or getting some cash flow. And I think it's important for all of us to look back and see, okay, that's where we were and this is where we are now. And just almost like in some points, survive long enough to give luck a chance, survive long enough to give luck a chance, so that's great. I appreciate all sharing that story, sharing those perspectives. Well, let's get into some more of the content, because I know you're probably itching. I know I can't wait to get going as well. The last thing I'll mention, just a couple quick rules. One of the rules that we have or 3 of the rules we have with our clients is, number one, that none of us is smarter than all of us. And this is why I love communities like the Growth Factory, because when they bring together the people in this room for this presentation today and the one after, so many of you can learn from each other. Like, yeah, I'm sure there's things I can teach you, and there's things that other experts in their domain can teach you, but all of you are living this every single day. So none of us is smarter than all of us. It means all of you can teach and learn from each other. So that's rule number one. I want to really emphasize that today, coming out of this session. Make sure you guys continue to collaborate and corroborate on these things. Number 2, it's always everyone's turn, which means that right now it's my dog's turn. She just barked. It's always everyone's turn. So you can use the chat box to ask questions. Suzette is here for that reason. She'll draw things to my attention if they need to be. Ask a question, share an idea, whatever that is. And then the third rule, I call it the 100% promise, which means you're going to get 100% of my 50%. And for us to have success in this session today, I need 100% of your 50%. So if we put those together, my 50%, your 50%, that's how we get the success we need. Does that sound good? Can you get a big thumbs up from everyone if we're all good? Awesome. Love it. Cool. So we're going to cover 2 main topics today. Number one, we're going to go through a model that I call from founder-led to founder-less selling, meaning that most of you are probably doing a lot of founder-led or founder-everything sales right now. And you want to get to a point, of course, where it's founder-less. And it doesn't mean that it's without the founder. It just means a whole lot less of the founder. And so we're going to go through these 3 phases that every startup goes through, and what are the specific challenges in each of those phases. So you can get like a really clear big picture of where you are now and what's ahead for you in the next 3, 6, 12 months. So that's one big area of what we'll cover today. The second thing we're going to cover is what I call the Q framework. So we had sent out a link where you could download a free copy of my best-selling book, Stop Hustling, Start Scaling. The book details the Q framework in really, every chapter is a different part of this Q framework. We're going to go through the framework with you today and show you how to start thinking about how to apply that to your business so that by the time you walk out of here, you'll have some much more clarity around how to think about your prospecting. You have a lot more control about how to manage deals in your pipeline, those never-ending free trials or, the long deal cycles, those sorts of things. And ultimately, I want you to have a lot more confidence so that when it comes time to charge the price you deserve to charge, to ask the customers to take action, to make sure that you're giving confidence to your customers with the results that you're promising them, that you'll have a way to do that. So the Q framework is very tactical and ultimately is designed to help you get more clarity, control, and confidence in your sales process. And then at the very end, I'm going to introduce you to what's called the 9 sales accelerators, and also share with you a little bit of what we call the startup selling systems roadmap. We won't have time to do a deep dive on those given the time that we have. However, I'm going to show you how to get some more help from me and from our team on how you can start to apply those to your business. So, does that sound good? You guys ready to rock and roll? That wasn't like let me hear a resounding, like,
Yes.
there we go. Awesome. So in your worksheets or on your workbook, you should see a empty diagram that looks like this. If you don't have a copy of the workbook, no worries. Even those of us that are artfully challenged could probably draw an XY axis with a couple circles on top. And so we're going to spend the next little bit talking about what we call going from founder-led to founder-less selling. Okay. So when we think about, and I always think about like, hey, if I'm you, and I have been you, I am you every day running my business, but certainly when it comes to running a tech startup, all of us, when we began this journey that we're on, every single one of us started that journey with really a very simple idea, right? Before you had product, before you talked to potential customers, before you figured out a way to move away from that day job and start spending more time working on this business, it was just an idea. You're like, I got an idea. Somebody ought to do something about this. Maybe it was a problem you saw in the industry where you've got a lot of experience, or maybe you saw that there's a bunch of new technology that could, like, something like artificial intelligence or machine learning or data science that could solve problems in new ways that weren't possible even 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago. Whatever it was, you're like, I got this idea. And that's a great starting point, of course. But if I suspect that you're like anything like the teams that we help and we work with every day, the idea is great, but where you really want to go is to a place where you're making a real impact in your marketplace. An impact meaning that the customers that you serve are changing the way they're doing business, they're becoming more profitable, or they're able to serve their customers better, or they're able to reduce the risk that they're exposed to. It's those customers coming back and you're like, wow, you changed my business. And if you can do that on a larger scale, not just for one customer or 10 customers or 100 customers, but do that for thousands of customers in your industry, now you and your company have made a real impact in your business. And so, of course, we know it's not just come up with idea, make big impact. We know there's this journey involved. And that journey usually looks something like this, where we kind of start off low and slow. Things start to pick up a little bit as we move along. And then eventually we hope to hit some kind of inflection point where, we're starting to see that growth really, really take off. So I want to kind of break this out for you and talk about these 3 phases that you're going to be in one of these 3 phases right now. And so I want to make sure you're clear about where you are so that you know what's next for you. Okay. And so let's start with the startup phase. So the startup phase is just that. And the true startup phase in the garage can begin with everything from tinkering on that first prototype or writing that first line of code, to the point where maybe you have a product in an MVP format of some kind. There's, that startup stage could really begin with those most nascent activities that you're doing with your business. From a selling standpoint, I always think about the startup phase as being that spot where your main objective in that startup phase is getting your first 10 paying customers. You're getting your first 10 paying customers. And I'm speaking directly to enterprise or B2B. I know if you're doing a B2C app and those kinds of things, it could be a much different kind of metric. But if you're selling enterprise, you're selling B2B, typically in that startup phase, your key objective is to get your first 10 paying customers. So I'm going to ask you, and I expect you to answer, do your best. Why do you think I use that phrase specifically? 10 paying customers. Why those 3 words?
You're willing to pay for your idea.
People are willing to pay. Absolutely. And when they pay, why do people give money to you?
They see value.
They see value. It means that what you've built is valuable, so valuable to them that they're willing to give up this thing called money in exchange for what you have, because they feel like what you have is worth that money or more, right? So it proves that you've created something that is valuable to your target customers. Absolutely. What else? Why else do we say 10 paying customers?
They're not a customer unless they pay.
Absolutely. Customers that don't pay money are just
Mhm.
users.
Users,
Right.
yeah.
They're just users. And usually the users aren't even really using it.
But you can actually learn real things from paying customers.
Like what? What do you mean real things from paying customers?
Okay, how are they using it? Where are the bottlenecks? Like in real life experience versus just people who talk or don't really pay for that. They care.
Yes, they care. Why do they care?
They paid.
They
Because
pay.
they paid. When people pay, they pay attention,
Yeah,
right? Because somewhere there was budget that got allocated, and maybe somewhere there was an approval, and somewhere, the executive said, yes, you can buy this thing. And now the executive is going to be wondering, hey, you bought this thing, how's it going? Right? So when people pay, they pay attention. So it's value, it's attention. And why do we use that number 10?
because it's enough. One is not enough, but.
Why is one not enough?
Because it could be random, but if you have 10, you can start getting some basic.
It could be your mom.
That's right. Mom was number 1, dad was number 2.
Yeah, convinced, but then kind of.
No, B2, yeah, B2B customers, even your mom, I don't know if they will,
Well, you never know. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You could certainly, let's say you have built this first version of your product, your technology, and you get that first customer, whether it was a network or somebody you know really well, or maybe it's just somebody who really had this problem, and they say, wow, you've got this thing, you can help me. Well, we also know that from a product development standpoint, that first version or the first couple versions of the product, it's not necessarily complete, right? And certainly with that first customer, the second, even the third customer, as entrepreneurs, as problem solvers, like we want to be involved. We want to learn from customers. We want to make sure that they're using it the right way. We want to learn that maybe what we designed it to do, they're using it in a different way. We're going to be very, very involved with those early customers. So much so that even though they're using the product, because we're such a key part of that implementation, it almost could feel like technology-enabled consulting, where the consulting piece, the knowledge piece, the expertise that you're bringing can be as valuable or even more valuable than the product itself. But once you get past, 2 or 3, we just know as humans, we run out of time or bandwidth, right? We can't give all of that time and effort and attention to more than a couple. And so there's a point where we have to trust that the product is doing most of the work. And yes, we've got support. And yes, we've got ways that we can fill in the gaps or put some duct tape or bubble gum over some of those gaps ourselves. But when you start getting to 10, that's where the product is starting to do more of the work, delivering more of the value. And it's starting to show you that, there's more than 1 or 2 customers out there. There's maybe there actually is a marketplace, right? And so the way I've always thought about this is, there's obviously that wonderful term, that wonderful place we want to get to of product market fit. You hear investors talk about it. There's endless blogs, endless podcasts, endless presentations at conferences. You got to get product market fit, get product market fit. Well, yes, you got to get product market fit down the road. But the first thing you're trying to accomplish in the startup phase isn't necessarily product market fit. You're getting product problem fit. You're proving that the product you built solves a problem for customers, so much so that they're willing to give you money because they see value. Therefore, you're earning revenue, which is a necessary component for a business, right? A business without revenue is really just a very expensive hobby. And you're starting to identify who are going to be those early customers. Because I suspect for many of you, you have a product or a solution that you could sell to a lot of customers. You could sell to, even if you're just focused on, say, healthcare and health tech. Well, healthcare, health tech is $1 trillion plus industry. There's hospitals and insurance companies and healthcare systems. There's big ones, there's small ones, there's regional ones, there's international ones, there's US-based ones. It's an enormous market, but we can't sell to everyone, especially at this early stage. What we're starting to do by getting those first 10 paying customers is starting to get a sense for, within this huge marketplace that we want to help and serve over time and make that an enormous impact. There's a couple of very specific types of customers within that large industry that seem to be the best customers for us for now. And I'm going to talk more about this later on when it comes to the Q framework. So that the real objective of getting those 10 paying customers is so that you can achieve product problem fit, start to prove that you're creating value there by measuring revenue and revenue growth, and starting to figure out who are the target customers for now to get you to 1 million or 3 or 10 plus in revenue. So ultimately what we're trying to do here is prove viability. Trying to prove like, no, we have a viable company. We have product, we have customers, people give us money. Maybe we're not making money yet, but we're starting to prove that there's something here. It's a viable enterprise. So how many of you are kind of in this phase right now where you're getting your first 10? Couple of you? Cool. Great. And what's been most challenging for you in those first 10? Is it somebody mentioned about awareness before? Is it like figuring out where to target and where to focus, or is it something else?
Yeah, I would say it's awareness, getting the word out that you have delivered value for a client. Now you're trying to get the second client or third client. Where do you target? But to target, you need to, it's marketing the broader term, but there's awareness you need to create in the market, right? And the target market you're going after, that's kind of a bit of a stumbling block sometimes if you don't have the right content, right messaging.
Yep. For
I would
sure.
say getting people to make that leap of faith with you before you have significant data.
We call those early adopters. Right? You're looking for people, it could be an early adopter. It could just be somebody that has enough pain in their business that they're willing to accept a partial solution, or that they've tried every other way, whether it's traditional channels with IBM and Oracle, or they tried consultants, or they tried to build it internally and nothing seems to work. And so they're like, look, like this seems to be the next best option for us. It's worth at least giving them a try, because this is so painful for us. We got to try something. If we don't, it could be competitive pressure, it could be market pressure, it could be internal pressure. Got to do something. And so either way, it's honing in and finding those people within that big marketplace that have that pain so much so that they're willing to take a leap of faith with us, for sure. Good. Helpful so far?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So as you're, what can be challenging is knowing, like, when are we coming out of the startup phase and moving into the ramp up phase? I was mentioning my son a little bit earlier on today. He's 11. There's a couple of big days in an 11-year-old's world, right? There's the first day of school, which is a big day for the wrong reasons, right? There's Halloween, there's Christmas or the holidays, there's birthday. These are like very specific events, like October 30th, not Halloween. October 31st, Halloween. It's very clear when it is and when it isn't, but it's not necessarily like that as you're moving out of that startup phase and into what we call the ramp up phase. What are some signals that might indicate that you're starting to feel like, oh, we're moving out of the startup phase and into more of a ramp up phase where the pace of customer acquisition is accelerating? Maybe it's starting to get a little bit easier. Those of you that have gone through this or maybe are in that later stage, what are some signals that helped you feel like, hey, we're kind of out of that early stage and starting to move more towards a bit of a repeatable model?
People are paying us more money.
Price increases. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great signal. What's another one?
Inbound.
Yeah.
Inbound? Yep. Could be a good signal. What are some others?
Then when analysts start to cover, depending on the space you're in, if there's coverage by analysts, and they start to include you in their coverage, then you kind of
Yep.
know that you kind of hit a new level.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not going out trying to get anyone to pay attention. All of a sudden we realize like, oh, we're in that G2 chart, or we're in Capterra, or we've been noticed by somebody, maybe a press article or a blog post or something else. Maybe we got invited to speak at a conference, and maybe it's not the big conference in the industry, but it's a smaller conference where they realize like, no, these guys are actually experts in this area. So those are all really good signals. And so as we're coming out of that startup phase and moving into ramp up, what we need to do is start to think about how do we go from just viable, where as founders, I mean, let's face it, everything we're doing here to get this growth, it's all hustle. It's all grind. It's what we call founder everything sales. It's like chief executive officer, CEO actually means chief everything officer, right? It's founder everything sales. You're the one doing the prospecting. You're using network, you're using introductions, you're talking to investors. You're the one that's doing the demos. You're the ones doing the sales calls. You're the one that's following up with people. You're the one sending out the proposals. You're the one that's negotiating. You're the ones doing implementations. You're the one at night at the kitchen table doing customer support tickets. It's like founder everything. And it's just hustle and grit and grind. It's like the necessary thing you got to do to get those early customers. But it's really, if you start to think about that work that we're doing, we also know that hustle doesn't scale. Hustle doesn't scale, right? So we need to go from a place of pure hustle where we're the ones that like, it's almost like we're taking the business off the ground and we're starting to hold it to our waist, and then we would get it up to our chest. And maybe at some point, now we're like holding this thing up with our arms. But if you've ever held something over your head for any period of time that has any weight to it, even my arms with no weight on them, at some point they get tired and there's too much weight. We need something that comes to help support us. Otherwise, we just can't hold it up anymore and everything crashes. So what we've got to do is start thinking about how do we go from just pure hustle and hard work to a place where we have some more systems in place, And when I hear the word systems, the word I always think about is a word that came up earlier, which is repeatability. Repeatability. So when we move from startup into ramp up, what we're really doing is going from, hey, we've proven viability of problem product fit to now, and because we have those early customers, we're starting to get a sense of trend as to who our best fit customers might be for now. We're starting to get a sense like, oh, we can actually charge a little bit more because we know what the value is that we're bringing to those people. We're getting to a place of awareness and repeatability. And there's 3 areas ultimately from a selling system standpoint where we have to go from just founder everything to more of a case where the systems are working just as hard or even harder than we do. And those 3 areas is one is around your lead gen, meaning that, yeah, it's great if we're going to go on LinkedIn and send out messages, or we're going to personally send out emails, or we're going to pick up the phone ourselves as founders and make those phone calls, send those emails, send those messages out and get leads. But we also have to be at a place where I know I can't do that forever, right? I need to have some systems that are working for me so that if I'm coming to this education event today at the Growth Factory, there should be something that's kind of working on the background, knowing that it's okay if I go take this day because I've got some other way of getting leads. And that lead could be inbound stuff. It could be some automation around outbound. It could be knowing that, hey, in 2 weeks, we're going to go to this big conference over in San Francisco with our industry. And we've got a pretty clear view of, like, because we know who our early customers are that have had the best success, and we know who the buyers are at those companies. If we go to that specific conference where those businesses are going to be and those decision makers are going to be, we know we can go to that event for a couple of days and walk away with a really clear basket of new leads. So it's having that repeatability around lead generation. The second place where we need repeatability is around that sales pipeline, meaning that once we get those leads, we need to have a system to say, okay, how do we qualify that lead? If we go to that conference and get 20 new leads, or if we get a set of inbound leads every week, or we're doing some outbound and we're getting some replies, even though we're getting those leads, not every lead is equal. Some might just be, interested in the demo. Some might be what I call buyer vampires. They just suck the life out of you and never buy anything. And some of them may in fact be qualified. They have a problem, they need a solution, they want to get some help, and they're actively looking for something that's going to help them. So we need to have a system that we can use that we can build by learning from those early customers. What are the qualification metrics by which we're going to decide whether or not this lead is real or not? That's an example of a pipeline system. A system for how you do your product demos, making sure that you're running your demos in a consistent way, or that you're customizing every demo for each customer so that you can get to that next phase in the sale. Having a pricing strategy that's more consistent. You could have 10 customers and some customers paying you $300 a month and others paying you $3,000. And that's okay in the early stage because you're price finding and market finding and doing all those things. But at some point, you got to have a repeatable pricing system. You need to have a support system behind you. And that's the third piece, the customer support, customer success. So once we get that new customer, how do we implement? How do we train? How do we support? How do we make sure we retain those customers? How do we resell to them? And eventually, how do we upsell to them? So at some point, we can't just do all of those things ourselves in this hustle phase, in the startup phase. We need repeatable systems that will help us get more growth. And if we do that, then we go past just having 10 customers and a little bit of revenue to a place where we can hit some really big check marks or checkpoints in that growth. So what are some of the big checkpoints from a revenue standpoint that some of you are looking at? Like what's like a big revenue number that a lot of you look at as a startup that you want to get to?
Break even.
Break even?
100 million?
100 million? What's a smaller number that's closer to where you might be?
$100.
$100?
We're trying to gauge your range there.
Like 50K,
Well-
50K ARR.
50K ARR? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the number I always gravitate towards is the magic million.
Million, yeah. I'd say that's
Right.
our-
And a million is a good round number to use just because it's 7 digits. But it's also a number that if you're going to go out to the investment community, you're going to try to raise a C or a Series A round of capital. Most investors will tell you, look, once you get to $1 million in ARR, and nowadays it's even more, maybe it's more like 3 million in ARR, then we can talk about a Series A. That's what they'll tell you.
Yeah, actually, what I heard is even at 1 million is for seed now. So
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely
Yeah.
gotten much more challenging in the environment that we're in, unless you're an AI company. And so we work with a lot of investors. They introduce us to their clients. We do workshops for investors in their portfolios. And so I've talked to a lot of them, and I've always been curious. Like I always tell people, I always ask investors, like, why do you use $1 million? Like, does it really matter if it's 990,000? And the answer I always get from investors is like, look, yeah, the revenue matters, but as an investor, I know that the only way for most startups to get to $1 million or even 3 million in revenue is that it's got to be more than just founder-led or founder everything sales. It's got to be more than just messaging people on LinkedIn. It's got to be more than founder at the kitchen table answering customer support tickets. There needs to be an actual business. There needs to be some systems in place that if that founder is out raising money for 2 or 3 months on end, that they're still growing the business because they have repeatable systems for getting leads. They have some ways of pulling deals through the pipeline. They have a certain retention metric where once they get a customer, they keep that customer and eventually resell to them and eventually even upsell to them. And none of that is possible with just hustle. There's got to be something else that's supporting what that founder is doing every single day. And while they're still not in a place to hire a full sales team with a VP of sales and all those kinds of things, the company will have had to have kind of graduated from being founder everything to being more like founder-led selling. Founder-led selling, meaning the founder has kind of put these lead generation systems in place and has some documentation, and that can go to, they can go to the conference and have meetings and have 2 or 3 people work the booth and do some mini qualification and pull those leads for them. Or they know that, okay, this is what qualifies as a good opportunity versus not a good opportunity. And we're only going to focus our time on those that are better sales opportunities. They know how to qualify. They know how to deal with objections. They know how to deal with technical obstacles that come up around integrations or data sets, or how to handle procurement. All of those things are only going to happen by having some system in place. And so on that growth curve, back here, when you're coming out of the startup phase with 10 customers, you might have 100K, maybe 300K in revenue. 10 customers paying you 30K a year on the high end. Now you're getting to a place where it's like 1 million to 3 million ARR. So you can see the growth is much higher here than it was back here, but hopefully around the equal amount of time and effort to get there. Right. So now this is the best part. This is the place we all want to be. Nobody wants to be a startup forever. We all want to be scale ups. And so if that first phase is getting 10 paying customers, the second phase is getting from 1 to maybe 3 million in recurring revenue. Once we hit the scale part of the business, that's where we should be thinking about how do we consistently 3x our growth every 18 or 24 or 36 months. And the way we do that is, number one, we have to have really clear metrics. We need to know, as a business owner, how does the business operate? What are the key metrics that I need to be tracking with lead generation, and how many deals are in the pipeline, and what's the average contract value, and what's the time to close, and what's our retention rate, and how long should it take to implement our new solution, and how many times do we have to train somebody? Like, as it's almost like Captain James T. Kirk at the Starship Enterprise. You're like sitting at the captain's chair, and you've got these dashboards and these visuals and these people around you telling you, yes, we're on course, or no, we're not on course. The metrics are what are now driving the business. And those metrics are possible because we've built systems. We've built systems around lead generation to know, if I go to a conference and I spend $10,000, I should walk away with 20 qualified leads, 5 of which turn into opportunities, 2 of which convert into business in the next 6 months. That's a metric around conferences. If I'm doing outbound, if I send 100 new prospects an email campaign, I should get 40% of them to open, 10% should reply, 3% should book a meeting, and half of those should lead to a sales opportunity. Those are metrics. I'm not going to know those until I have the systems in place. And once I have them, I can use those metrics to drive the business. And what's better is, once we have the metrics and we know what systems we're running, then we know what kind of team to build. Somebody mentioned earlier, it's hard to find sales talent. And one of the things I mentioned is that sometimes it's hard for us to find sales talent because we don't quite know what kind of sales talent we need, right? If I'm looking for a professional dancer, somebody that, let's say I'm going to choreography the Super Bowl, and it's the halftime show at the Super Bowl, I might have a certain way that I want those dancers to dance, a certain talent for dancing. And if I go to Broadway and the Broadway dancers don't know how to dance the kind of dance I need in the Super Bowl commercial, they might be great dancers on Broadway, but if I try to get them into my Super Bowl halftime show, it's just the wrong fit. Their skill set is different than the skill set that I need for my show. It's the same with your business. If your business and your lead gen, say, is based on outbound, and you don't yet know the metrics, and you don't know that outbound works, but yet you go try to hire somebody that may not be comfortable with outbound or may not be good at outbound, then you're going to have the wrong fit person doing a job that needs to be done by somebody else. So the systems drive the metrics, and the metrics help you figure out what kind of person you need, and more importantly, how to measure and compensate their performance. Because now you know, this is our outbound campaign that's working. I should be able to sit somebody in that system. They should be able to get the same metrics. If they hit those metrics, I pay them this. If they don't hit these metrics, then they're out. Right? And then finally, the third thing we need is, now we are stepping up. We need to have a management. We need to know how to manage the team. We're not doing the sales every day. We're not doing the prospecting. We're not doing the demos. We're not doing the customer support. This is where we go to founder less. And this is cases where, yeah, you're still going to parachute in, work big deals. You're still going to meet with some of your big customers. You're still going to sit with your sales team sometimes and make sure that they and their managers are doing things the right way. But it's a whole lot less of you doing these things every day. So the first phase, startup, is around hustle. The second phase is around system. The third phase is all around building a team. And the team is what allows you to scale. And what you're actually scaling are the systems that you build. So there's startup, ramp up, scale up. And now that you're scaling, now that's when you can make these big jumps. You go from 1 to 3, 3 to 10 million, 10 million to 30 million, and so on to get, to that $100 million place that you want to go. And that's where you're making huge impact in your industry. But you can't skip steps here. Everybody goes through these 3 phases, just like a child goes through infancy, childhood, adolescence, puberty, and eventually into adulthood. It's the same thing with your business. So let me just pause there. What's most insightful for you? I want to hear from at least 3 of you. What's been most insightful as you kind of see this big picture going from founder-led or founder everything to founder-less selling? Bring the sketch back up.
Not necessarily scaling revenue, scaling system.
Tell me more. What do you mean by that?
Well, I just think it's an interesting perspective because I think we all look at that graph in the beginning. We think about scaling our revenue, but as you go through the process, you do realize that you do scale your systems, and as a result, your revenue increases.
Yes. Yep. The systems actually give you leverage. It's like if I can figure out how to take all the learning from the startup phase, start to build a little repeatability in my lead gen. Now I'm actually getting some leverage in my time. Like once I get that outbound thing up and running and working the way I want it to, let that run. I can go do other stuff. So now I'm doing the other stuff and we're still getting leads. And even better, we're building those repeatable systems so that I can go find the right SDR to run the outbound for me. And that's what gets me to a place of scale.
I thought the concept of the founder everything, the founder led, the founder less.
Yeah.
They feel like goals to me as well. So, obviously right now, our hands are usually in everything, every detail, which is great. That's important. We need to know the nuances to be able to lead a team. But then eventually you're just driving the vision, and managing the operation. So anyhow, that was a good light bulb.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective. I was asked once, what's one of the biggest mistakes that founders make when they're growing and scaling their business? And my answer to that question is they either hire too soon on the sales team or they hire too late. So hiring too soon is, we don't have any customers, we don't have any revenue, and I'm not good at sales. So I'm just going to find somebody who's going to magically figure out how to sell this thing. That's hiring too soon. Or, I got 10 customers and 100K in revenue. I'm going to hire a chief revenue officer. I need a CRO in the room to really help me build up my sales process. It's like, no, you got to build some systems and then slowly build a team. And then eventually, when you're a $30 million company, you hire a CRO. So those are examples of hiring way too soon, right? Now, on the other hand, at some point, our passion, our desire, and candidly, sometimes our mindset is like, no one can do it better than me. And I'm afraid to let go because every new customer is so important that we actually never get to a place where we're hiring help. And it doesn't mean you're hiring an entire sales team, but it could be something as basic as hiring somebody to help you with some marketing, or hiring somebody who can run those outbound emails, or hiring an admin assistant to help you run your inbox and help you run your calendar. We get so stuck in we must do it ourselves because it's too important that we never let go and we hang on too long, and it actually strangles the business's ability to grow because we've been hanging on too long. So sometimes we wait too long to hire people. And I've actually worked with a client this year. It's a company that's doing $10 million in revenue, and it's founder everything sales. He has yet to figure out, or had yet to figure out, how to get other people selling his product for him. And so it's great that he's got $10 million in revenue, but he's actually struggling to close a Series A. He's got 10 million in revenue and can't close a Series A for the exact same reason I talked about earlier, is that the investors are like, yeah, it's great. You got 10 million in revenue, but like, if you get hit by a bus, what happens? Everything stops. You are the revenue engine at this business, and that's not the way you're going to scale. So that's why he's been working with us to kind of fill in, okay, how do we get pieces and parts of the selling that he's doing to other people? So eventually he can let go and let those people take over and grow the business so that he can do the vision thing, the CEO thing, the big picture thing. So great perspective there, Craig. What else? Let me hear from one more person.
I have a question.
Sure.
How do you build the systems if like a founder doesn't have experience in sales and they don't have enough funding, early on to hire expensive advisors, or obviously it's too early to hire like people.
Yeah.
What's the most efficient way to build the systems, a successful way?
Well, that's an ideal segue into our next.
I had one more thing that I wanted to add was just to kind of go back to what you had initially said at the beginning of the presentation about getting out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
All of these things that are on this page look very clear, but all of these steps are attached to a lot of emotion from the founders. And it's not as easy as just making the decision to go from A to B and B to C. These different things, some of them from an emotional level can be extremely difficult, especially when you have the pressure cooker of revenue and customers and deals. So I just wanted to voice in our experience, which is a little bit further down the line towards the end of this graph, that it's not just as easy as making the decision to do it. It's really making a shift in your emotional intelligence and being willing to let go of things that you may not think are a good idea, or they don't feel comfortable, but they necessarily have to happen in order for you to grow.
That's a really good point. I going back to the ultra running analogy here, a lot of times people ask me like, God, like, how do you run 200 miles? How do you do 100 miles in 25 hours or whatever? And the answer is like, yeah, you got to train, and yeah, you have to plan, and yeah, you need to have support and all of those things. But at the end of the day, it's like, it's the decision that you make when you get to the starting line. The people that finish are the ones that have decided at the beginning, before they start, that I will get to the finish line. Like, you're going to have to helicopter me off of this trail or drag me off kicking and screaming. Otherwise, I'm going to keep moving until they tell me I'm not allowed to move forward. And it's that decision that you do from the beginning that gets you through some of those emotional periods, like when you're feeling down and you're feeling in the dumps. And it's having people around you that are designed to help lift you up, and finding those people that are experts in certain parts of the trail. This guy, Nathan, he's hiked that section of the trail 3 different times. And then in preparation to Pacefy, I found out later he went back and hiked it a 4th time, just so he knew that 20-mile stretch of trail was burned in his brain, so he could tell me what to do every single step of the way at night. Because we left this aid station at midnight. We didn't get to the next aid station until almost 7 in the morning. And that was after I'd already been running and hallucinating. And so it's like having that people, having that structure, having those systems. Sometimes it's people, but sometimes it's that plan that helps you get from checkpoint to checkpoint, and making that decision that the only way for me to move this business forward is to make these hard decisions and start letting go.
I also would like to add regarding the system. So to come up with a system, you need to analyze your journey. You have to be through to that point so that you can develop a system.
Yep.
So without the analysis, it's really hard.
Well, should we talk about systems?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
do it.
All right. Teach it long enough. So that was kind of part 1 of our conversation. And part 2 is going to be going through the Q framework. And the Q framework, the Q stands for questions. And using these 7 questions in the Q framework is designed to help us analyze and start to build that baseline framework, that baseline process, to get to more of a repeatable revenue process when it comes to growing and scaling our business. So what we're going to do is walk through these question by question. I'm going to introduce some concepts. I'm going to give you some tools. There are some parts of your workbook that are actual worksheets that you can take back and use. Again, we won't have time to do them in person, like in real time today, because of the short time that we have together. But these are all things that we can help you out with in a later session if you want to, after this workshop. So in your workbook, you should see a worksheet that looks something like this. And so this kind of throws people because there are 9 boxes and 7 questions. Don't worry, it's all going to add up at the end. And so what we're going to do is take this Q framework. We're going to take this row by row. So we're going to go through the first 3 questions in the Q framework. Then we're going to talk about the next 2, and then we're going to talk about the last 2, and that's going to get us to the 7. So everybody good with that? We're clear? Rock and roll. Okay. So let's talk about that first row of the Q framework. And so this first row of the Q framework, these first 3 questions that we're going to ask is focused entirely on your prospecting. This is going to help you start to build out your prospecting plan of action. That's kind of our end goal. Because if you think about your sales process, like we talked about a few minutes ago, there's your leads. How do we get leads? How do we prospect? How do we bring people into our sales funnel? The second part is our sales pipeline. How do we manage those deals? And the third part is our paying customers. So we're going to go through prospecting and then pipeline and then paying customers. This first row is all around prospecting. So the first question in the Q framework is what? And specifically, we're talking about is what is the problem or priority that you help your prospects solve or achieve? What's the problem or priority that you help your prospects solve or achieve? So why, if we're thinking about a sales process, we're thinking about selling to a target customer, why do we want to start with this question of like, what's the problem? What's the priority? Why do we begin here?
You identify their pain points and what they will be willing to pay for to eliminate.
Yeah. We need to identify a problem. What happens if we can't find a clear problem at our prospect?
It's hard to close.
Yeah, so.
It'd be awfully hard to sell. No problem, no sale, right?
Also ties into messaging too, right? If you don't know the problem you're solving, then what are you sending in your messaging? What's going to resonate?
Yeah. Like when your prospects are out doing their job every day, are they sitting around going, man, I wish I just had like this AI platform that could help me collect all this data and put it into a dashboard so I can make better decisions. Is that what they're thinking?
No.
Or are they thinking, why the fuck can't our supply chain work? You know, or God, why do our sales reps keep missing quota? Or man, like we're spending half our money on marketing, but half of it's getting wasted. And I don't even know which half is getting wasted. Like those are problems. That's when we think about prospecting, we always want to enter our prospect's mind in the place that it's at. Because if we come to our prospects with product this, AI that, feature this, benefit that, it's going to be hard for them to make that connection because they're not thinking about it that way. So we begin with what problem do they have or what priority are they looking to achieve? Because that allows us to enter their mind in the place that it's at. And so one of the best graphics I've ever seen on this is that it's not enough just to have a problem. This is from a book called Spin Selling. And I know there's some folks that have been around probably as long as I have, if not longer. Anybody heard of this book before, Spin Selling? So it's by a guy named Neil Rackham. It's probably published almost 30, 40 years ago. And one of the things that he talks about in this book is the difference between implied needs and explicit needs. And this also comes to qualification and doing what we call customer discovery, is that, you know, if we're anywhere on this side, and you probably had this situation where, you know, you've talked to a prospect or you've met somebody at a conference or you talked to them on the phone, or maybe there's an email conversation going on and they're like, yeah, that's kind of an issue for us. That's different than this problem is existential to our business. If we don't solve this problem, we're in big trouble from competitors or we're in big trouble from internal pressures. And so we not only need to find a problem, but we need to make sure that that problem is big enough that the prospect needs to take action on it to resolve it. And so while this is a nice graphic, I think another way to think about it is this. Like that shark is a big problem right now for that person in the canoe. They need help. Right. And so one of the things I want you to think about in context of this model, when we're talking about the problem or the priority, is we're going to play a little psychology game here. So on my screen, how many people see a red dot right now? Yes?
Yeah.
Everybody sees a red dot? Okay. How about now? Still see a red dot? No? Yes?
No,
Oh,
No, of course not. Red dot. Yes, everyone sees it.
yes,
Yeah. So the first thing we're looking for, like the dot represents, is there a problem? Or we use this word priority, meaning, is there a strategic priority that the business we're selling to has to achieve? We can help them get there. Problem is usually almost like ambulance chasing, like, oh my God, we got this problem, we got to solve it. Priority could be more strategic, which is look, by 2024, we want to achieve these outcomes. That's a big strategic priority, right? Now, as stated in that earlier graph, it's not enough just to have a small dot, right? We also need to be thinking about this in terms of, is it just a small little dot? Is it a medium-sized dot? Or is it a dot that takes up pretty much the whole page? So it's not just, is there a problem? But it's, what's the perception of the problem? Meaning, is it just a small problem, a medium problem, or is it a really big problem or a really big priority that we have to help people achieve? And so when we're thinking about that messaging, we're thinking about your targeting, we're thinking about how we're going to approach our prospects and have those early conversations, unless we're really clear about a problem that they have and that problem is big, the perception of the problem is very big, and that it's one that we can help with, chances of us getting any kind of sale into that business is going to be really, really small. It's going to be really, really small. Now, later on, we're going to build on top of this model, but I just want to kind of burn this in your brain with a graphic in terms of small, medium, large size problem. So let's just do a quick, couple of examples. So I want to hear from 2 or 3 of you. When you think about like the problem statement that your customers have, what are examples of a specific problem that your market or the people that you're selling to have that you help them solve? If you're going to tell me not about what your product does, but you're going to tell me like our customers struggle with this or they have that problem, how would you describe that to me in a sentence or two? Not everybody at once, please.
For us, it's my sales reps don't update the CRM, and because I don't have data and visibility, I'm struggling with forecasting.
And why is that an issue? Why is that a problem if I can't forecast and get visibility?
miss
I
their
missed
sales.
forecast last quarter.
They're going to what?
But
Say it
they
again?
they missed forecast last quarter,
Less revenue.
Yeah.
With the CRO.
right?
What was that last piece about the CRM?
I said it's the number one job of the CRO to forecast accurately to the CEO. It takes that.
Yeah.
Pretty.
Yeah. So, hey, when I talk to CROs out there, I know that in talking to people like you, one of the biggest challenges they have is trying to get good data out of the CRM so that they can forecast accurately, not just for this quarter, but now you're probably also thinking about forecasting out for 2024 because you got to set budgets. Is that a struggle that you have? Is that something that you have an issue with? And they go, oh my God, yes. Now you're speaking my language, because people are coming out of the summer and they know as soon as summer hits, it's budget season, September, October, everyone sets their budget for next year. Everybody sets their forecast. It's not just Q4, but it's even a much bigger problem going into next year. Great example. I don't even know what your business is, but what you've done is you've told me what problem you help your target customers solve. That's really good. Let's do another example.
Employee retention. So my business customers have a problem with retaining their employees. And they're looking for ways to keep them, it costs much more to recruit new employees than to maintain or retain their employees. So they want to do that. And also then they have high medical claims that the employees are filing because they don't feel well.
Okay.
Yeah, there are a few others, but those are the two major.
Okay. And so let's use the first one, which is employee retention. Why is that a problem, or why is it a priority for them to fix that problem?
And it was then it will hurt the revenue because those employees are executing their either sales or service. And once they are leaving, they don't have those people. They need to hire new people. They have gaps. They can't satisfy their customers.
Yeah,
Or, generate more revenue. And it takes time to bring on board a new person. It takes a few months.
there you go. So in your case,
more
it's like,
excitement.
yeah, there's an issue with like employee retention, and that's an issue and a problem, but the real priority is, look, I mean, the retention is killing us when it comes to hitting our sales goals in Q4, because right now we have open recs for sales territories that we know, even if we fill them today, chances of those people picking up and hitting the number in Q4 is pretty small. And if we have a rep in an important territory that we don't even know is thinking about leaving, and they leave us high and dry for another company, and they have a big pipeline, and those deals don't close in Q4, oh my gosh, we're going to miss our revenue number. Like those become existential to somebody, not just like, yeah, some employees are quitting on us. Right. So it's almost thinking of that second or third level effect.
Yeah.
Of those problems. Great. One more. Let's do one more. It's your time. I'm here to help you. Don't be shy. Huh?
So I'll go.
Great.
For me, it's about, so for us, it's about revenue leakage. So the market that I sell into, the services they provide, they don't collect properly on time and the full amount. So they're losing a lot of revenue, so that's a revenue leakage issue, and that's something that obviously drives, drives them to find a solution, fix the problem.
So if I understand what you said correctly, people go, they start a transaction, they do a partial transaction, but they don't complete the full.
No, let me get, I was trying to do it without actually.
Yeah.
So the market we go after is healthcare providers.
Uh-huh.
And so they get a lot of claims that are rejected with insurance companies, a lot of bills that are not paid because they didn't collect the right data, the proper data documentation. So
Okay.
that's the revenue leakage that they track. And when it's over 10% or 15%, it's pretty significant.
So the real problem is like, look, we're tying up all of our medical professional resources and helping these patients, but we don't actually have a way of getting paid for them.
Correct, which affects the compensation of the physicians and healthcare providers. And
Yeah. So it's a combination of look, if we want to help people, but we can only help people that we have a capacity to pay either out of pocket or through insurance providers. We got these people coming in, we don't have a good way of collecting. And if 15% of the patients we help, we can't collect on, like that's 15% of our business just disappears.
yeah, affects the financial health of the group. Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's a much bigger pain or a much bigger priority. Right.
Yep.
Exactly. Good. Cool. Let's keep moving then, because I want to move. This is good because the second question, again, remember, we're thinking about your targeting and your prospecting here, these first two questions. The first is what problem or priority? Number two is which niche are you targeting? Which niche are you targeting? So what do we mean by that? Why is this an important question or a critical question for us to be able to ask and answer around our business?
Focus your sales effort and make you more efficient to know, what the needs of that particular customer base might be.
I couldn't quite hear, it was a little bit hard for me. What I think I heard you say is, if you're focusing on a niche, it helps you to better address those people and the stuff that they care about.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. What do we mean by a niche or a segment? What do we like? How big is a segment or a niche? Is it big? Is it small?
Usually small, I think about it, but there could be multiple. Small niches within a larger.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, let's take banks. Banks is a sector of the industry, of the economy. It's $1 trillion industry. And we can say, okay, well, banks is a target market. Well, kinda, right? So what if we said, well, what about mortgage lenders? Okay, not every bank does mortgage lending. So now we have a subset of all banks. Now within mortgage lenders, there's actually bank lenders and non-bank lenders. There's two different subsegments of companies that do mortgage lending. So we're going to say banks that do mortgage lending, not the non-bank ones. And now within those banks that do mortgage lending, how many people have heard of a bank called Wells Fargo? How many people have heard of a credit union called Golden One?
Yeah.
Sure. We live in the Sacramento Valley. Lots of Golden Ones. I have some savings accounts at Golden One. I also had a mortgage through Wells Fargo. Now, both Golden One, even though it's not a bank, it's a credit union, it looks a lot like a bank. They make loans. You can get a mortgage loan through Golden One. You can also get a mortgage loan through Wells Fargo. Now, the size and scope of the problem, the way that mortgages get originated in Wells Fargo, is it the same or different than the way that mortgages are originated at Golden One? What's your guess?
Different.
Probably a little different. Why is it a little different?
Scale.
Yeah,
But one's a bank and one's a credit union, I think there's a little difference.
little differences there. But yeah, for sure. Like Golden One, I don't know what the mortgage volume is for them. Let's just say on a relative basis, maybe they do 50 mortgages a month, 100 mortgages a month, maybe more. But it's probably in that range. Wells Fargo probably does 100 mortgages a day or an hour, right? They're the number one mortgage lender in the United States. So the size, the scope, the scale of that problem that they need to solve, while both might need assistance with improving the mortgage lending process for their customers, the way that Wells Fargo needs a solution is way different than the solution down here. And it doesn't mean that we should, just go sell to Wells Fargo because they're big. It could mean like, hey, we're not going to touch that for now because instead we want to help the small guys because we think we can help them better and we can help them compete with the big guys. But it's knowing that even within that sector of banks, mortgage lenders on down, there's a range inside of there. So even within that subsegment, there's niches that we could say, we're only going to work with bank lenders that do under 200 mortgages a month. That becomes a niche because that allows us to become an expert when we're talking to Golden One or we're talking to a small regional bank saying, hey, I understand your problem because you're competing with the big guys and the interest rates you offer might not be as good. And therefore customer relationships are that much more important. Or customer experience is that much more important. And here's how we're going to help you leverage that strength that you have using our platform to help you compete to get from 200 to 225 mortgages per loan in the next 12 months or per month, right? So that's what we mean by going from big market down to a specific niche. And so one thing that can be really challenging, there's a worksheet in your workbook that looks like this, is how do we narrow our niche? Because if we think about going back to that idea or that early diagram from startup, ramp up, scale up, right? The startup phase, we're just getting those first 10 customers and even getting customer number 1, 2, or 3. The whole purpose of getting those 10 is to start to figure out who do we sell to. And so in that startup phase, usually what's going to happen is it's likely you'll actually have a pretty wide range of customers in that startup phase. So I was at a company called Blend, which I mentioned earlier. We happen to sell lending software, mortgage lending software. And in our first couple of customers, we actually had one of our very, very first customers was a very large institution called Freddie Mac. Now, Freddie Mac is a mortgage investor. They're actually not a mortgage lender. But there are certain components about our product. They're like, hey, that data analysis thing that you built, we could use it because we don't have any other solutions. And we got $400,000 that we can spend on this. Can we buy it from you? That was pretty much the sales process. It was like remarkable. It was a 6-week sales process for a $400,000 sale. Now, that was not our intention to sell to people like Freddie Mac, but because we had some relationships, because they had an urgent need, and because we're like, shit, let's just get a customer, we took it, right? Why not? Now, on the other hand, our second customer was a really, really small mortgage lender called Lenda, which was based over in Marin County. Now, they're an actual mortgage lender, but they were only doing like 20 loans a month, super, super small. And we're like, okay, that's cool. So Freddie Mac signed a contract for $400,000. Lenda signed a contract for $100. That's literally what they paid us, $100 to get started. right? Then after that $100, we were going to help them implement our workflows and get it into the mobile app and do all those things. Well, it turns out that they were a huge pain in the neck to work with because they were so small and they were started themselves. They couldn't make the time. They couldn't get back to us quickly. We couldn't make the progress that they wanted us to make. We finally both mutually agreed, you know what, this isn't a good fit. And it was a good lesson for us to realize like, while the small lenders might be accessible and easy to sell to, actually kind of hard to manage. Now, our third customer was a customer called NationStar, which is now called Mr. Cooper. And they started using our mortgage lending software for mortgage servicing, which is different than mortgage lending. I won't get into all the details of it, but at least it was more towards mortgages as opposed to investors and working with really small companies. It's a top 20 mortgage lender, mortgage company in the US. Our next customer after that was a company called Freedom Mortgage. Then we worked with a company called First Key. And then we had this bank that used to exist called First Republic. Kind of a joke. I bank with First Republic. And so what we realized is like, oh, okay, now we actually kind of got our sales motion working. Like we kind of got a sense for, okay, this is how we talk to the right executives. This is how we present our value. This is what we do. We started to realize like, okay, now while it was nice to have this contract signed, they were kind of a pain. We don't want to work with those kinds of customers anymore. And while it was lovely to have Freddie Mac as a customer and a logo and $400,000, the problem was we needed one full engineer, like an actual person, once a week for half a day to do a bunch of data processing stuff manually. So it was like half of a day of a key engineer. And after a while, we realized like, wow, that's actually really expensive for us. And after 18 months, Freddie Mac came to us and said, we love you guys. You've been awesome. We think we found a different solution and we're going to move in that direction. And we were like, cool. We didn't try to keep them because by then we had picked up these other customers that were more like the ones we realized we wanted to service. So we X'd them out. Now, NationStar, while I was in the mortgage space, was using it for servicing. They weren't using it for lending. We're like, that's really not the ideal case. What we realized is like, there's a cluster of these three accounts, Freedom, First Key, and First Republic. They're actually using the software for what it was designed to do, which is mortgage lending. Cool. So that meant we had kind of proven this is the niche. We want to work with top 100 banks, lenders in the United States, not the small guys, only the top 100, because they had the technical capabilities to implement our solution and they had the big need and the pain. And so for those first few customers, yeah, we were kind of all over the board, but that was our startup phase. Once we started moving into this ramp up phase, that's where we started to narrow our niche down. We said, we're only going to focus on customers that are like them. And so it was kind of like trial and error, but it took some courage for us and some good fortune in a way for us to learn we don't want to sell to them. How many of you have customers right now that you wish you could fire? Anybody have a customer you're like, man, I really wish I didn't have this customer anymore? Anybody?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I
Why?
told them that we're not the right solution. We're super high maintenance and
Yeah.
we couldn't handle them.
But at the time you were like, yes, customer.
Celebrities from Beverly Hills. I'm like, we wanted them.
Yeah.
It was impossible.
And that's okay, right? That's part of the learning. That's part of the experiment, the petri dish that you're going through every single day. But what's important is that we learn from those to then say, okay, let's go from wide to more narrow, so that the more narrow we are, the more that we're talking to customers just like First Key and Freedom and First Republic. They're like, if you're solving those problems for those guys, chances are you could help us as well. And that's what led to our next customer, which is Wells Fargo. Then we picked up US Bank and a bunch of others. And eventually we just got really narrow for the next 3-4 years, all the way through. We started in that scale up phase. So we got up to about $10 million in revenue, just focused on top 100 lenders. And then after that, you know what we did? Then we started going wide again. Then it was like, now we got these nailed. We got the reputation. We got 10 million in revenue. We got $40 million in funding. Now we can go a little wider. Now we're going to go for the top 500. And that's what got the company to 30 in revenue, 30 million. And then after that, it's like, oh, now we got a full sales team, we got a full sales motion. We can start dividing up territories where we have like our big account reps that handle the big guys, and we've got some mid-market people that handle the medium guys. And now we can do a bunch of inside sales people that handle the small guys. And we're starting to develop that motion over time. This took 7 years to get there. And then once the company hit over 100 million in revenue, that's when it was able to be in a position to IPO. So I share that with you because it's so tempting, because you're like, oh, we want to make a big impact. We want to solve this problem. The technology can work in a lot of different places. Yes. And in order to solve a lot of problems for a lot of people, you got to focus on problems for a few people first. Even Amazon started with books. Remember those days?
Mhm.
Right? Why did they start with books? Anybody know? The real answer? Is it because Jeff Bezos was just like a bookworm and he just loved the great American novel? What was that?
Were they easy to ship?
They're easy to ship. They're all about the same size, easy to get in inventory, easy to ship, easy to cheaper to send than lawn furniture or dog food, right? You're just using that to prove the model. And then they did lawn furniture and pet food, and then eventually Kindle and Alexa and everything else that they're doing now, right? And even for those first 7 to 10 years, even after they were public, if you go back and read some articles, there were times around the Christmas holidays where literally Jeff Bezos was in the warehouse picking and packing boxes after they IPO'd. If people like to point to Amazon and all their operational efficiency, it wasn't always like that. They had to figure things out over time, right? It's the same way with your sales process. So the reason I say this is that the more you can narrow, the better. And it's okay to experiment a little bit, as long as you know, we're going to stretch, we're going to try, selling a little bit to this business, or we get an inbound from telecom, even though we really want to focus on insurance. All right, well, we're just going to try it. And if it goes well, then we can make a new decision. If it doesn't go well, we're going to just go back to focus on insurance, as an example. So a way to help guide you with this, there's a worksheet here in your workbook where you can take a little bit of a scoring system to this. And there's a couple parameters that we use around your personal interest in selling to that industry's willingness, or those businesses' willingness to pay, and ability to pay. How big is the market? How much experience do you have as a team in that market? How quickly can you access people in that market? And you kind of score it. And it's not to say, look, if you had 3 more markets, let's say, we think we can sell to mortgages, we can sell to telecom, we think we can sell to insurance, and you run the scoring system. You're like, okay, 21, 20, 18. Okay, mortgage wins. Not always, but it's just a way for you to get this down and start to look at the pros and cons of each of these, so you can do a better job hypothesis testing. So I would encourage you, if you're still trying to figure out what 2 or 3 markets to focus on, and how do you go from 2 or 3 down to 1, this is a tool that you can use as a starting point. Is that helpful? Good. I can't always see people. That's why I'm asking twice.
Yes, yeah.
Give me a verbal.
Yep.
I feel like the flight attendant in the emergency room. I need a verbal yes from each of you. Yes. Cool. And there's a couple other questions here that you can use as well. So the third question that we're going to talk around prospecting is like, who are your buyers? What do we mean by buyers? Are we talking about companies here?
The people.
Yes, we're really talking about the people. And so I love this diagram. So imagine a company org chart. It's just a random org chart.
Yeah.
There's a place in an org chart where we can draw a line. And the people here are what we call above the line. The people here are what we call below the line. Why do we say above the line and below the line? What's the difference? Telescope, microscope.
Macro versus a micro.
Tell me more. What do you mean by that?
So some that look at it more strategically, higher level, bigger picture, longer term, and those that execute on the day-to-day, shorter term.
Absolutely. There's a really great book called Selling Above the Line by a guy named Skip Miller. absolutely suggest you check it out. Really, really good book. And that explains this concept. So if we were to take this org chart that we just drew and think about the time scale that those people think about, the people above the line, if it's the board or, the CEO, the C-suite, they're usually thinking somewhere at least 1 to 3 years out. If it's a publicly traded company, you see the annual reports. They'll say our 5-year company strategy is this. Now, of course, the CEO cares about hitting the Q4 number. They care about the next earnings report and all of those things. But typically, from a strategic standpoint, they're thinking, okay, what are the macroeconomic shifts that are going to affect our business in 2024? What happens if interest rates start to fall at the end of 2024? How can we leverage that for our business? What are the new markets we might be able to enter into in the next 12 to 18 months? Like, that's the big picture stuff people above the line think about. If it's a senior vice president or an executive vice president, they're going to be thinking anywhere from usually like a quarter ahead. Like, what does my business unit have to do this quarter to hit their number? So they're thinking anywhere from quarterly out through about 1 year, right? Now we get below the line, and it could vary on industry, say VP, director, manager, contributor, right? VPs are usually thinking 1 month to 3 months. I got to get my team to hit their monthly number or their quarterly number. Directors are thinking, maybe the end of month reporting to my VP who's going to roll up to the SVP. The managers are thinking like a week ahead. What do I got to do to get my team to do their job this week? The contributors are like, hey, when's my break? When's lunch? When's break, What's my shift over? What time's my shift over? And we've been there. You've been in a grocery store. Hey, how's your going? How's your day going? Great. I get off in an hour. That's how they're thinking, right? So it's our job when we're out there prospecting is making sure that we're not just selling below the line, because those people are going to be the one feeling the pain every day of the problem that you solve, but it may not be a strategic priority for the company to solve that problem, right? So that introduces us to what we call buyer types. And there are 4 types of buyers in an enterprise sale. So there's what's called the economic buyer. What's this person do? What's their job when it comes to purchasing? Why do we call them? Not necessarily the lowest prices. Their job is to write the check. This is the economic buyer in the businesses you're selling to. Those are the people that write the check. That's whose budget this is coming from, right? So you might be dealing with a director or a VP, but if you're selling a $100,000 solution, maybe that VP can't approve a $100,000 purchase. Maybe the VP can approve a $30,000 purchase or a $10,000 purchase. But if they want to get a $100,000 purchase, they got to go up above the line. So while the VP may be excited and the VP wants the proposal and the VP said, I'm going to see if we can get budget, our job as sellers is to get access to the economic buyer. Second buyer type is what we call the technical buyers. And I use plural. What's the job of a technical buyer? Or who are the technical buyers at the companies you're selling to? What do they do?
Evaluating the solution and giving their approval, the technical approval to buy the product.
Yeah, and we use that word technical. It could mean technical with a little t, right? It doesn't, yes, they might be an IT person or a CTO or an engineering person that's like, hey, I'm going to look under the hood and make sure that this thing works correctly. What are some other examples of technical buyers within an organization that have to approve a purchase?
People in the operation,
Could be what?
people in the operation.
Could be operational.
If the product is operational. No, if the product is operational, like in a hospital, for example, people from hospitals. Someone needs to make sure that it really does, right?
But who else in a hospital would care about whether or not your solution is safe to use?
Could be legal.
Legal. Keep going.
I hate legal.
Compliance, medical office.
Compliance, definitely compliance.
Compliance, yes, oh my God.
Right. Oh my God, compliance, right? Those that are like, oh, is this HIPAA compliant?
Yeah,
Always a question in any healthcare sale. Who else would care? Maybe a chief data officer.
mhm,
How do we get data out of your system into our system, and how do we make sure nothing gets lost? A chief risk officer might get involved. You may have 5, 6, 7 technical buyers. The people, the geeks, if you will. And the geeks are there for good. They're there to protect that company from making a mistake. So again, our job is to find and sell to those people, right? Because they're going to have all kinds of reasons that they want to say no. And it's to protect their ass, and it's to protect their company's ass. Then there are the user buyers. What is their job?
confirm if they're gonna use it or not.
Yeah, I mean, they're the people that are probably happy, like, oh my God, this looks awesome. I would love to use this every day. We like those people. But do they have purchasing power? The answer is no. Usually not. Right? Those are the people below the line. And then the fourth are what we call our champions. What's the job of the champion?
Champion the deal internally,
Remove
sell
obstacles.
it internally.
Remove obstacles. I love that. Sell it internally. Maybe get us access to the technical buyers. Like, okay, look, love what you're doing. So it looks like the users want to use it. I'm going to help us get a meeting with the senior vice president so they can understand what we're doing and what the value is and why we're going to invest 100K. And I'm going to help us get a meeting with the compliance people and the risk people, because I know they need to see this as well. The person helping you from the inside. That's it. Right. So it's important for us to know who the buyers are. And again, all the more reason why we need to focus on a niche, because each type of customer is going to be a little different. If we're trying to sell to a bank and sell to healthcare and try to sell to telecom, it's going to be different org charts, different people, different approvals, different compliance, different regulations, different requirements, right? The more we narrow, the more we can remove the variables in the sale and know exactly who are the people we need to get access to and sell to in order to execute on the sale. And the reason this is a prospecting question is because it's going to define who we outreach to, and to make sure we're getting all of those people involved in the conversation early, so we're not stuck with a single point of contact who's just going to vampire the deal on us. Questions or thoughts? So I'm going to introduce one more thing on this. We're going to come back to this model we looked at before. We have different buyer types. We might have different buyers in the organization at the same company. You might have a user buyer that's consumed by the problem, like a wildfire. We know about those around here, right? Fire all around them. They're feeling the heat. They're feeling the pain. Meanwhile, the user could be here, but the CTO is way out there. Their proximity, look at the distance they have to the problem versus the person that's in it. Now, this user's manager or VP might be kind of on the edge. Like, oh, I know that my team is struggling with this. I want to help them, but I also have this fire and this fire. I got to figure out where am I going to send my attention, right? Different proximity. Now, as you think about the more buyers that you're layering in, you might have a CTO, you might have a chief compliance officer, you might have a chief risk officer, all surrounding this problem. So what we've added is we know we need to have a problem, and it needs to be a big problem. That's the perception. We know that every buyer has different proximity to the problem, but they also may have a different perspective on how the problem should be solved. The risk officer might go, we should just hire consultants. The compliance officer might go, oh, I'm talking to these 3 other companies. The CTO might say, you know what? We don't have to do anything right now. That's why enterprise sales gets really hard. We have to understand all of these things as we're moving into our sales pipeline.
Okay.
So hopefully this isn't scaring you too much. Just delivering facts. Let me just pause there. I know we're coming up towards the bottom of the hour. I'm going to introduce you to the other parts of the Q framework that you can work on. And then I want to also show you how we can get you some more help coming out of this. So what's been helpful about these first three questions? What problem, which niche, who are the buyers? I've already talked to some of you who mentioned like this prospecting piece is a big part of what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish right now. Talk to me a little bit. What's helpful? What's useful? What questions do you have?
Yes.
We're all good?
All of it.
Good. Okay. Well, let me run through. Well, first, let's do this, Suzette. One of the things I wanted to make sure that everyone knew about, I know some of you already scheduled time with me. We made a calendar available to you where you can grab some time with me individually. Some of you I spoke to before. The rest of you I can talk to you after. We can just take some time, look at your situation, and help guide you through how to apply some of this stuff. Totally pro bono, where we set this up through the Growth Factory. So, Suzette, if you would put the link in there, and we'll email it out again. You should have seen it in your inbox already. The other thing we can do, of course, is make this recording available to you and some other resources around what we're going to cover or what we didn't get to today. Okay. So let's talk about, I just want to at least introduce you to a couple of these other questions. So we talked about the top part of the Q framework, row number 1, which was what, problem, which, and who, and that's all around our prospecting. Right? Now I want to just introduce the middle part, the pipeline piece. So the question 4 in the framework is, where are you in your sales process? So question, anybody know what this is a map of? Yeah, somebody got it. Awesome. I used to play the old Legend of Zelda on the original place. It's like little squares and pixelated. It's so funny. I showed it to my son. He's like, you did that? You played that? Now he plays all the Breath of the Wild and all that stuff. So yeah, it's a map. Why do we need a map as sellers? What's important for us as sellers why do we need a map when it comes to knowing where we are in the sales process?
Drive next steps.
Got to have next steps for sure. What else does the map help us do?
It will help us understand what works and what not. And
Yeah.
Figure out.
Are we making progress towards the goal? Right? So there's a worksheet that I included. This is a way you can think about building out your sales map. So if we think about big picture and stages in a sales opportunity, you know, like typically stage 1 in general is like, we got to figure out what's the need. We need to analyze needs. Stage 2 is then if the company we're selling to has a need, what are they going to do? They're going to evaluate whatever options are available to them. Once they're evaluating options, they're going to start going from large list to small list. And the small list companies that they're looking at are options. They then need to do what we call resolve concerns. They have questions about each one. Is this going to work? Is this the right fit? Is now the right time? And then finally, the last stage is they're going to implement that solution. So that's kind of big picture. Now, within each of those stages, that's where we as sellers, we need to know what our process is for selling so that we're not at the mercy of the buyer's process for buying. We need to know what is our process for selling so we're not at the mercy of the buyer's process for buying. Meaning that these are just examples of specific steps within that big journey that you can treat almost like a little checkbox. And this would be different for each of you based on who you're selling to. But you might say, hey, if a brand new lead is still doing needs analysis, I need to have a qualification call. Maybe I need to look at their product and know who they're selling to. I need to have a preliminary meeting with each of the buyer types. And I need to have a general idea of like, how are they going to assess ROI on this? If I have those things, I'm getting that information, that tells me this is probably kind of a real opportunity. So then we can move to the next phase. And this is where things get a little more serious. Like maybe they want us to sign an NDA. That's good to know so that we are dealing with decision makers. Maybe we do some kind of test file or POC. Maybe we come up with some timelines. Maybe they introduce us to procurement. So we know, like, hey, this person knows how to get things approved. Check, check, check. Okay, now we're making more progress. Now we go into the next phase and so on and so forth. So the idea of this is just to give you a little bit of a guide. So as you're analyzing your sales steps or your phases, your stages in your sale, it gives you a sense for like, we need to check these boxes before we can move forward, right? Because a lot of times we might do a demo, get lead from the website, do demo, they ask for proposal, and then what happens?
Ghosting.
Yeah, you get ghosted. Why?
But they have other things.
Could be anything, right? Maybe it's not really qualified. Maybe we're not dealing with decision makers. Maybe there's not a real need, right? Maybe we've shown them a demo, but we haven't shown them how we can solve their problem. There's lots of little things that we missed if we just go inbound lead, demo, proposal. So the idea here is to fill in all of these gaps so we can stay honest and we can hold our prospects accountable and say, hey, this sounds great that you want to see a demo. First, let's have a couple of conversations with different stakeholders so I have a better understanding of the problems that you're trying to solve right now. Then once we do that, I can run a customized demo for you so you can see exactly how we could help you at your business. See how that helps us keep control of the sale. You follow? So then related to this, somebody said is like, when's the next step? So I think about this as like the big checkpoints in the journey. And in between that, we need to know when is the next step. So my guess is all of you have heard at least one of these. Hey, great presentation. We'll circle up and get back to you. Can you did it? What if you did a demo and they're like, hey, send me your deck, send me a one-pager. Or that's lots to digest. Let me talk to the team. Or hey, shoot us a proposal and we'll let you know. Who's in control of the process here?
They are.
Well, yeah, they are, right? So instead, what we're going to do is keep control and introduce things. One example is called a mutual action plan. So this is Megan Mishiak. She's one of the coaches in our program. She developed this template for our clients. And it's a way for us to say, hey, you know what? I'd love to send you the deck, but you've got other folks on your team. They're probably going to look at the deck and they might have some questions. So instead of me sending the deck, how about we set up a second call with the other technical people on your team so I can run a demo for them as well. So I can answer their questions. And let's do that in the next 2 weeks. So collaborating with your prospects to figure out when is the next step, coming up with a plan of action, holding them accountable so that we can keep control and make sure that we're vetting out this opportunity. So we got to know big picture, what's our map and what are the little steps in between to get us through that journey, right? And ultimately, worst case, just remember BAMFAM. Anybody know what BAMFAM is? Anybody heard of BAMFAM?
Nope.
You're gonna love this. Book a meeting from a meeting.
Wow, nice.
It's easy, right? Hey, we're gonna think about it and get back to you. Cool. So when's your next team meeting where you guys think you'll be discussing this? Probably next Tuesday. Okay, great. So let's do this. Let's put a meeting on the calendar for Wednesday so that after you guys meet, my guess is based on experience that some people on your team are going to have some more questions. So let's put a call on the calendar for Wednesday. So when you have that team meeting, jot down all the questions that people have. And then on that call on Wednesday, I can answer some of them. We can figure out if it makes sense to keep moving forward. Now, what happens if a prospect goes, oh my God, that's a great idea? What does that tell you?
Interested.
Yeah. What if they say, oh, that's okay, we'll get back to you?
And they're not interested.
Probably not interested, right? It's a way to qualify as we go.
Mhm.
So a mutual action plan is just a much more detailed way of BAMFAM. You're creating a schedule of events for you and your prospect, getting other people involved, getting other buyers involved, making sure that you're moving this through your sales map to get to that destination, which is executing a sale for you and solving a problem for your prospects. Good so far? Monique, can I go like 7 more minutes?
Now we have it 3 o'clock and I want to give them a little bit of time. What time is it?
2:30.
2:30.
31.
You guys good with 7 more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, what we'll do is we'll wrap this up and then you guys are gonna get up and do a lap around the building. I got
Yes.
Peace for you. Get some sugar in you maybe. And then our next presenter will start at 3. He's in person today, so we're gonna rearrange the room a little bit. It's workshop style. So with that, Scott, I'll let you take 7 more minutes. Thank you so much.
6 minutes, 6-minute abs,
All right, let's go.
6-minute abs. So last row down here, and again, all this is in the book as well. So make sure you grab that copy if you haven't already, because it also has links to some of these worksheets. I just want to introduce them to you. So question 6 is, why will your prospects buy from you? Meaning that if you hear things like costs too much, no budget, sounds expensive, what are they telling you? What are they saying?
Value's not high enough.
I don't see the value, right? So every purchase should be a return on investment. It should be ROI, not a cost, right? ROI, not a cost. So I'm actually going to show you a quick template, and I'm going to also make sure that you get a copy of this. I think it's too important. I'm going to pull this from our client library. Usually reserve this just for clients, but I'm going to give it to you guys as a gift. So this is a very extensive ROI assessment template that you can use and modify with your deals. But I just want to give it to you so you have an idea of where you should be going with your sales opportunities over time. So this is designed to be a collaborative document with you and your prospects when you're later stage in the sales opportunity. When you know there's interest, you're getting interaction, you're starting to talk price and budget and approvals. You go, great, before I send you a price or a proposal, why don't we do an ROI assessment so that you and your team are really, really clear about when you invest this money to work with us, what are you going to get back? And so this is a document that you can just fill in. Who's it prepared for? Why is it the document exist? Here's an executive summary of why we're having this conversation and why you're going to buy from us. And then it's much more detailed.
Hey, Scott, did you pull it up?
Oh, it's not showing?
Yeah.
Here it is.
There you go.
Yep. So it's a template. Now, this is something we usually work with clients on for like a while to help them implement, but I think at least getting this template to you will help you start thinking about this. What are the assumptions around the project? What are their change criteria? What is their decision process and critical dates? This is the level of detail that you want to be able to get into with some of your prospects, especially if you have a 30K, 100K plus kind of deal, because they have to justify that expenditure to themselves and to those people above the line. So we'll email a link to this out where you can take it, use it, and adapt it. But I use this as an example of where you need to get going, where you need to go with your prospects, as opposed to just like sending a proposal with a price. Okay. We need to show them why they're going to buy from us. And then the last piece is the last question 7, how do you deliver your solution? Meaning implementation. How many of us feel like implementation is kind of like this? We've all been there. I've been there. I can't tell you how many cubicles I've sat in, typing up bug reports, working with engineers, trying to get things implemented, right? So one of the things we want to do is be able to tell our prospects ahead of time, how will we implement? And again, this is detailed in the book. The idea here is the baseline way you can think about implementation is through what we call 7 by 1, meaning that if you walk yourself through a new customer, if they were to go live, what are all the things that would happen in the 7 firsts? Meaning the first minute your prospect were to tell you, let's move forward, what are the things that happen? What would happen by the end of the first hour? They said, we want to move forward. What would happen by the end of the first day, the first week, the first month, the first quarter, the first year? It's a way for you and your team to sit down and get really clear about what are the steps to getting to implementation. Then you can use this implementation plan as part of your sales process to show it to your prospects and say, this is how we think about implementation. Where would you change this? What would you adjust? and give you and them confidence to take the action to move forward with you. That makes sense? Cool. So I think that's actually a pretty good place to wrap, because I used 5 of my 6 minutes. So, again, I really wish I would have been there in person with you so we can hang out, ask more questions. I could take a walk around the block with you. So thanks for being flexible, and big thanks to Craig and Monique for setting up the technical whiz bang stuff to make this happen. I've got a list of all of you folks. I know we've talked to some of you already. Some of you have already scheduled calls. Let's make sure you take advantage of those. And let's just not make this the end of our conversation, but maybe the first of many. So Monique, I'm going to turn the talking stick back over to you.
Thank you. Can we give the meeting? Been waiting for this session like all year. It's like my favorite thing to talk about, and I think that it's so valuable to have partners like Scott in our community. So I just want to thank you so much for all the effort that you put into preparing this, for all the time that you're making to meet with our founders, and for all the value that you
course.
deliver today. So, yeah, we're really grateful.
Well, I mean, I love what you're doing at the Growth Factory. I've been in Davis since 2008. A big believer in the Sacramento Valley and what's possible here. I think it's one of those places that gets overlooked too often. And there's great founders just like you out there that I want to make sure are getting the same support as the people sitting in Silicon Valley or other places in the world. So I'm here, I'm local. If we ever need to do maybe an office hours day where I can pop by and hang out, answer questions or something else, I would love to do that and support the local.
Please, yes.
Thank you so